Okay, I'm just getting started here. Hi. This is Kate, and I'm with CJK, and he's on the phone with me. So we're just gonna be chatting. It was Friday. It was Friday the 13th. This the other day, and so it got me thinking about superstitions, and just that as a prompt for a bunch of random topics of conversation. So say hi, CJ.
Hello, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be able to talk about this subject. I think it's really interesting, so thanks.
Cool. Well, when I invited you to talk about this, did you have any first thoughts about something that it made you think of?
Well, the first thing I thought of was the song Superstition by Stevie Wonder. Not sure why.
Ooh, that's a good one. Yeah, if we could buy the rights to songs, we could be
Yeah,
playing that right now.
yeah, seriously though. But yeah, I mean, yeah, besides that, I just thought of how it relates to a lot of subjects. I thought about, obviously like supernatural type stuff. Um, I mean, I guess they're not exactly the same, but to me, they're kind of linked just in the sense that there are things that obviously some people, believe in and some don't, and some people, experience and other people don't. So to me, they're kind of interrelated, but yeah.
Absolutely. No, that's funny that you say that because I've been watching X-Files.
Yeah,
And
yeah, I'm
so,
not super familiar with it, but yeah.
well, it's all about the dichotomy of the two of Scully and Mulder and the the guy who believes in alien abduction and the medical doctor FBI agent who studied hard sciences, and she's basically there to spy on what he's doing and to discredit him, and she comes to kind of understand and experience these things, and yet she's still skeptical, but the show itself really talks about those concepts. So I've been geeking out about that. So I'm glad you say that because, yeah, I agree totally. You have to suspend some disbelief sometimes to even have empathy for somebody else and like to try and put yourself in someone else's shoes. Um, you can't always literally do that, but in a way you can um, either decide right from the get-go, oh no, that story's BS, like how people are critical of religion, because I was thinking about how religion is similar to superstition, and from the point of view of somebody who doesn't buy it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah, I mean, yeah, some more than others, like to the extent that they have, again, yeah, claims and beliefs that aren't verifiable through like a scientific standpoint. Obviously, lots of people believe in them, and um, yeah, I mean, I personally don't. Even though I am, I'm not religious. I was raised around a lot of religion, and I know people do like take those things seriously, and they mean something to them, and I don't discredit it out of hand or anything. So definitely, there's a lot of similarities there.
Yeah. So I just wanted to briefly maybe talk about what are the superstitions that we can think of that are common in at least where we are in the United States.
Cool. Well, I have a few examples, but they're actually not as common within the U.S. But I know of them through my mom, who moved to the U.S. from the Philippines, and they actually um, they're most of the people there are Catholic, which my mom was Catholic, but they also have like a lot of other beliefs that maybe you don't really find as much with like American Catholics. Like they do have a lot of things, more beliefs that would be considered like superstitious. Um, like one thing I remember prominently is like a belief in like witches, basically. Like I remember my mom telling me one time that she believed that a witch had put a spell on me because we were like at the store or some random place, and just like some random lady kind of just said, "Oh, like what a cute little kid" or something about me. And my mom told me that like that's how witches put a curse on people by complimenting them. And
Oh.
and she said that you can get sick from it or something like that. And one time I did like get sick or something after that happened. And my mom actually took me to like some of her friends who did some kind of like religious ritual, just like prayer or something. Um, and then I guess I got better after that. So there you go. It's an example, I guess.
Wow. Yeah, that is interesting. Because that's something loosely I was trying to articulate, and I'm glad that you have that kind of cultural relationship because I when I was trying to attend college before I just flunked out, um I just gave up, and um I was trying to study some things about um the Spanish coming to Mexico, and that that cultural conversion that happened in turning people Catholic, and how they had to incorporate some of the the local traditions into that. And then and how like the Catholic Church tried to exclude a lot of their traditions and make, for example, religious ceremonies pious and solemn and dress in black and sad and quiet, because the native traditions had been to be celebrating and having these parades down the street. And the Catholic Church was like, no, we don't want to do that. And they shift people's cultural traditions, and then there's some that linger, and there's some that people don't let go of. And I think a lot about that when it comes to the people who are like uh refugees, um how we lose that culture really quickly in generations. So I didn't know that about you, um yeah, it happens really fast. Like my grandfather's family was they were Armenian Christians living in Turkey, and they had to flee. So their culture was gone. Like my grandpa and his siblings, there were uh, 8 of them, and they didn't get to carry on any of that culture at all, except the one Armenian phrase I knew from my grandfather was, "If you didn't go to church, you'll grow horns on your head." That was something that I guess my grandma would say, my great grandmother rather. so yeah, I think that's interesting how the US is really homogenized in some ways, and a lot of people get assimilated um pretty quickly. But then yeah, if you dig in and you talk to your friends, like they probably have um those cultural traditions from their parents or their grandparents that maybe they're embarrassed about. I mean, kind of the current culture is to dispel anything that isn't official narrative, right? Like it's actually illegal to not toe the line with the official narrative these days, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I was thinking about how just words themselves have been made to be like curses. like like somebody's going to trademark a word, and then if you say that word, in your podcast, you're going to get shut down.
Yeah.
And I just feel like that's where society is pushing us. And it's weird. So I'm trying to figure that out. Especially with kids, man. Kids are into weird stuff. Have you ever heard of Five Nights at Freddy's?
I think so. Is that a game?
Yeah, it's like a horror game franchise. And then I think YouTube made it huge because of so many kids watching uh, people play the games through YouTube. Um, and it's kind of, grown up, but see, because when I was a kid, I was never really into horror movies at all. It creeped me out, but my husband watches every single film on the planet, and he reads a lot of like long running mangas, and he has a ton of graphic novels and stuff. So our daughter's been reading this Five Nights at Freddy's graphic novel, and then they're making a movie. And I think Jim Henson's workshop is making the puppets. But my daughter is gonna be 10, and she's like, "Will you take me to Five Nights at Freddy's movie? It's gonna be rated R." And I'm like, like, I don't know. So she's kind of pushing me in this. I'm just trying to think about, like, yeah, do you let kids like experience some of these things while, I mean, I'm trying to understand more about what she's actually into rather than uh deny her interests. And then I think, that's a way of kind of perverting it. If she's has to get sneaky, then that's a big division. And so I've been thinking about, yeah, like how um when we take things so seriously that it's debilitating, um then it's bad, right? Like if you have a little harmless superstition, maybe that's not so bad, but yeah, at what point does it get really bad? And if you make these hard rules, like, does that always work? Don't people always just do what they want to do one way or another?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Like, especially with horror movies and other types of horror, I think there's a lot of things there too. Like, and yeah, I guess people get different things out of it, like what they see in it, and what's like reflected about like society or about even something like in themselves or whatever. Because yeah, I didn't like horror when I was like a kid, but I've gotten more into it in recent years, and I've watched a lot more of it. And it's kind of like, um, yeah, there is kind of an aspect of almost, what's the word I'm looking for? Like vicariousness, almost like seeing horrible things and wanting to, like, just kind of like explore that aspect of reality or non-reality or whatever. It kind of, depending on what it is, it can symbolize a lot of things. And I used to be like kind of afraid, like, that I would start seeing like ghosts and stuff like that too. I mean, speaking of superstition, but yeah, and maybe it does play a role in, like, in people who experience that stuff too. Like, it could be the power of suggestion or whatever. And especially, like you said, when people have like traditions of certain things, and they definitely seem to die out like over time, like especially like when they move to a different place and all of that. But it also is passed down a lot of times. Yeah, I've definitely like known people who really like believe strongly in certain stuff. like whether it's ghosts or demons and all that stuff, and they usually learn it from, someone in their family, or someone like that. And yeah, it's just an interesting topic. I don't know how it all works, and that's kind of why I try not to like discount anything, because I think, if nothing else, in my opinion, like, I kind of lean more towards the, I mean, all I say personally is like, if I experience something, then I'll believe it. But I don't like say one way or the other whether something does exist or doesn't exist, because I think maybe, if nothing else, like, there's a reason people experience something, and maybe it's just a difference in the way people's minds work. I guess that's a more materialist understanding, but that's I guess that's what I lean towards personally. But yeah, I don't discount it completely.
Yeah, well, and I've definitely changed my mind throughout my almost 40 years now. So, and I mean, I'm kind of a collector of it all too. Like I have a bunch. I brought a bunch of props with me, things that I was just thinking about on the topic, and so these are like some oracle cards that I have. So like the Druid plant oracle, working with the magical flora of the Druid tradition. Um, so that's, I believe, where the term knock on wood comes from. So that's kind of in relation to your story about how a witch curses you with saying something good. Um, that's similar in business culture. Like if you meet like the big wig, he's like, "Oh, I've heard good things about you." Then like, "Oh no, does that mean I'm about to get fired?" um so yeah, and then I was thinking about so I don't know if did you watch the show that Sebs did today?
No, I haven't seen it.
It was good. She did one yesterday too. The Horseshoe Economics was yesterday, and then today, um, the title is "What Is Love?" Um, but it was a good one. But the guy that's always trolling her channel that she calls Peaches, um, he got on late in her stream and just started his normal bullshit. And I was just like, you suck, dude. It was a great conversation till you came in. And he likes to just copy and paste like quotes. And I think it's a superiority complex that he has, but he has no friends, and so all he does is go to Seb's channel to talk mad shit. Um, but he pulled a quote back at me, which is so funny because I found it in print in my compendium of Shakespeare's The Tragedies. And what he said was, Kate Godina, this fell whore of thine hath in her more destruction than thy sword, for all her cherubin look. And so I found it in this random tragedy of Shakespeare called The Life of Timon of Athens. And I know nothing about it. I had to do a Google search to find it.
Wow.
But it just shows his like he's so idiotic. Because he's trying to be so smart ass.
Yeah.
But so he was quoting this character named Timon. And I read the introduction to this play because it's never really been performed that much. It was never very popular, and critics have apparently just really, they're like, this even Shakespeare? This sucks. But I thought this introduction was cool. So, um, Timon is now as immoderate in his misanthropy as he was earlier in his bounty. He is foolish still. His transformation, though striking, has not been accompanied by any increase in self-knowledge. His sufferings have not brought him to an awareness of his own imperfections. They have embittered but not magnified him. One of his chief deficiencies as a tragic hero is certainly his incapacity for spiritual growth. Finally, Timon's response to misfortune is not only unheroic, but undramatic. He simply withdraws from the world of men. Far from becoming the champion of aspiring humanity in its endless struggle against evil, he rather slinks out of the race, where that immortal garland is to be run for, not without dust and heat. Dust and heat, involvement and conflict are the lifeblood of drama. So, yeah, I thought that was interesting, because uh yeah, I think there's a point in which we allow like superstition and doctrine and dogma to just like make us feel like we're morally superior because we're following these rules, but really we're assholes in our daily lives. Um and so yeah, it's pretty bold to like stand against that and break tradition. And, it's like, no, stepping on the crack turns out doesn't break my mom's back. So I debunked that one.
Yeah.
Um, and so yeah, there's just a lot of people in this world that take things so literally and then are so willing to condemn anybody else. And I just fear that's kind of what's happening now on this weird level is like, yeah, people are going to be begging for more regulations, for more laws when they are trying to silence everybody else. They don't realize that, yeah, they're setting themselves up to be silenced, and no one will come to their rescue because they were condemning everybody. you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's like a really fine line, like the idea of yeah, of defining like what goes too far, like the hate speech stuff or whatever. I mean, there's just really no way to define that can ensure that you won't end up on the receiving end of like some kind of regulation or silencing of your speech. And yeah, it's pretty sad when people go along with that because yeah, it never made sense to me. It's like if you're gonna espouse, you know, a certain kind of limitations or regulations or whatever, I mean, it'll probably come back to haunt you as far as speaking of superstition, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, I've just been thinking about this so broadly, because I have so many interests and um I don't subscribe to any of these clubs, although I like to check them out from afar. Um and try and have some understanding and respect for other people while at the same time being honest with them. Like always the Mormon missionaries come by our neighborhood and I'm in this springtime, summer, fall, I'm always outside in the front yard mainly working. So I see the missionaries all the time. I always talk to them. And I tell them that I feel for them. I feel sorry for them because Salt Lake City must be one of the hardest places to be a missionary because um, the people that aren't already members of the LDS church are like probably biased against it and pretty mean. And they're usually like, yeah, people are pretty rude.
Mm-hmm.
um and so I just try and tell them, hey, good luck. Like, I admire you for doing such a hard thing and trying to explore your beliefs. And I think that's a process. I think that's a lifelong thing. So yeah, I just find that really interesting, because I think that's a huge part of the collective human story through history, is just kind of how do we deal with that. Because my family's also been part of the Lutheran Church, and so like way back when Martin Luther wrote the 95 Thesis and criticized the Catholic Church, that was a big deal. That was just huge at that time. And so yeah, I think there's so many churches that just continue to fracture, but people are still trying to cling to faith. They're just like, oh, well, I don't really buy into that part of the dogma, so I'm gonna move it over here. And so I don't know, I just find that interesting as part of the human story, because yeah, that's very common.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's definitely interesting how many different segments there are just within what's considered Christianity alone. I mean, there's just so many different like branches and flavors of it. I mean, even I've been like exposed to a few different different flavors of Christianity, like even something like Jehovah's Witnesses, which are kind of condemned by a lot of other branches of Christianity. I actually had a babysitter when I was little who was a Jehovah's Witness, and she would like try to make me memorize different verses from like the Bible while she was babysitting me.
Oh no.
And
I had fun babysitters.
But yeah, I mean, and then like when I would go home and like, cause like I said, my mom was Catholic, and then like I would be like, oh, the babysitter was like having me read. I don't even know if they have a different like text or what. I honestly don't know. But like my mom would just say like, yeah, it's whatever. Like we have these, they're different religions, but at the same time they're not that different.
They are very different.
Yeah, and
I was recently talking to some Jehovah's Witnesses just before the winter, and I was asking them if they thought it was if we're in the end of days, and if they worry about that. And they said no, because of what it means. Presuming that, I don't know if they're waiting for Jesus to return, as some other Christians are. Of course, the Jews don't believe that Jesus was the Son of God. So they're waiting for him to come the first time, and then the Mormons are waiting for Jesus to come back the third time.
Yeah.
But I heard a really funny, to me, criticism of the Book of Mormon, which is that a lot of the language in it is like 19th century King James version of the Bible. And the funny thing is the Book of Mormon is supposed to take place in North America, but a lot of the references to plants are the same as the King James version of the Bible, and there were no Native North American plants in the Bible because it was in Europe. So that was one major discrepancy. But when I grew up in Florida, my mom would go to Bible study, and the Southern Baptists especially were really into like debunking Mormonism and like calling them that they were not Christians, that they were not even real Christians. Their doctrines were so different. But yeah, the Jehovah's Witness, they have this this idea that celebrating things is satanic. Like the origins of that are satanic. And then that's one of the things in like the truther YouTube content makers are trying to show all the occult stuff that's being hidden from us, like in symbolism and stuff like that. And I'm not sure. I mean, I'm trying to just keep abreast of it. But yeah, it's just interesting how everybody's fighting right now over absolutely everything. And then, yeah, now that we're all connected in more ways, it's just like, yeah, it's exponentially getting more loud. So I've been trying to just observe from afar, take it in, but um yeah, some people have a lot of weird ideas, and I don't know. I mean, I guess people would call me a conspiracy theorist. Um but I hate labels like that. I think, like you were saying, you just sort of want to be open to possibilities. You don't want to say that you know anything for sure either. Like, that's where I'm at. I'm just, but yeah.
Yeah, it's like that's always been like one of those questions. Like, there's so many sections arguing. Like you're mentioning the Book of Mormon is like based off of like Christianity. Like there was this one video that was talking about how like what Christians say about Mormons is the same as what Jews say about Christians. Like the Christians added to the Torah, and then came up with Christianity, and then now the Mormons are adding to the the Bible, the New Testament or whatever, and created that. So it's like, yeah, there's always this like endless arguing. That's one of the first things that made me really become critical of religion in general when I was younger. And but yeah, like you were mentioning about like the satanic stuff. Like, yeah, I mean, honestly, yeah, I've seen plenty of that in my time on like the alternative spaces on the internet, or the yeah, like you said, truth or whatever you want to call them. And yeah, it's tough because like yeah, I try to stay open, like you said, but at the same time, like when I start seeing these patterns of just like well, basically, like in my opinion, a lot of people seem to be like, "Oh, everything I don't like is satanic." And so when you start to see that, it's like I don't know how seriously I can take that. It's like when they're looking for a way to make something look bad in their eyes, which is which they align with like Satanism or whatever. It's just like yeah, things like that are hard for me to take really seriously. It's like, to me, it's almost like a metaphor. It's like they just want to align like what they think is good with Christianity or whatever, and then everything bad is Satan, satanic or whatever. And even in a lot of like the new age spaces, it's also like I find it kind of similar. It's just like yeah, like having just wanting it to attach certain things. If something's positive, positive to them, but if it's negative, then it's negative. So it's like that's a lot to try and like figure out. I don't know. I just like you said, I just try to like navigate it and be open to it, but I don't find any of it like super convincing personally. But like I said, I think it comes from a certain place. Like I think all the religions and beliefs, like even the New Age and whatever, they all come from a certain place, like a need for meaning and a need for like to believe in direction and all that. So it's just kind of how I see it.
Yeah, totally. I wanted to show I'd been going through all my books for some inspiration. I had this cool book it's a coloring book of folklore and symbolism of flowers, plants, and trees. And so I think that's one huge example from history of just like, yeah, taking old world, some might call pagan beliefs, and then adopting them for the times. Um, and then I have this cool book from Brian Froud. Um, it's 2 books in one: The Good Fairies and The Bad Fairies. And I these this artwork came out when I was a kid, and they got republished more recently. And so his story is: the fairies I draw are a spontaneous manifestation of my relationship with the world. A normally invisible domain is given form first of all in my sketchbooks. Fairy faces emerge from the blank white pages as if out of a mist. A few loose random squiggles are drawn, and suddenly a complete personality appears, demanding attention and a name. So that's really interesting because he has, for years now, um, been drawing these, painting these incredible um, fairies. And so here's just one example of the folklore in many cultures. The owl is the spirit guide to the underworld, often, etc. All claim the owl as their totem bird. And early Sumerian moon goddess figures have the all-seeing eyes of the owl. So I'm trying to dig more into that, just like the interest of folklore, myth, history, religion, culture, just tiny subjects, right? Really easy to grasp all of that in a lifetime. But yeah, I'm just really curious about it all. So I'm just trying to listen to everybody and not go too far down the wrong rabbit holes. I'm trying to trust my intuition when it comes to like, okay, yeah, am I listening to some really weird stuff that I need to step away from? Because like, yeah, it just doesn't feel right. Mm-hmm. But yeah, there's one guy that's getting pretty popular. His channel is called Archaics. And he talks about, the whole world being a simulation, but kind of if you can maintain your own free will, you can actually break it. Like, it's not a perfect system. And although I don't fully agree with all of his premises as being literal, I think in a figurative kind of way, it makes me think about a lot of things as it relates to the work of like Alison McDowell or Sebs, or these people who are really trying to get into the weeds of like all of those details. And then there's others who are more into the esoteric side. I appreciate what it makes me think about, at least, they're kind of seeds that I'm just kind of letting sit, and who knows when those thoughts are going to kind of link and correlate to something, and I can appreciate, whatever random nonsense I might have heard. But yeah, I have a hard time keeping up with like just the Alison McDowell work at that scope. But I kind of appreciate the call to alarm, because I definitely don't want to go down this route of like, being stuck. You were saying you have Sims 4. I've never played that. Can you tell me anything about it?
Yeah, I mean, it's I guess, some people have kind of likened it to, the whole metaverse thing, like that's what, certain powers or interests that we want to make us, just these figures in the game, and being kind of controlled. But yeah, I don't know. For me, it's just one of those things to just kind of like kill time or whatever. I don't go too deep on everything. I gotta have some times where I'm just experiencing something just as a pastime. Um, but yeah, it is kind of um, yeah. I don't know what else. I mean, yeah, what else is if there's anything like super weird about it, I haven't like encountered anything that's like kind of kind of like conspiracy like or whatever. I don't know, but then yeah, I mean, I guess it is somewhat bizarre to like find that to play that as a game, like where you're just controlling people. But I guess it's kind of a release. I mean, in some ways, like you get to just live some other life, I guess. So maybe like a precursor to the whole metaverse. Like you get to live vicariously to some degree through these figures that can do things that that you may not be able to do in your real life and stuff like that.
Yeah, I have always told my family the reason I don't play games anymore is because I get addicted. They're a huge time suck, and I get too into them. Um, so I'm just trying to do other things because I have so many um freaking interests, you know. And all the projects that I try and get into, I never have enough time to finish them. But one of my resolutions for 2023 is to be reading a lot more. And so far I've done pretty well. I mean, I've read one book this year that had been on my shelf for years. So I was lucky when I was in college, just about to quit school. I was getting really pissed off at how expensive college books were. And at the same time, there were used bookshops closing down. There was one big one closing down, and they were having a sale, so you could fill up like a grocery store paper bag. You could fill that up for $1.
Oh no.
So, or maybe maybe $2, and they were just clearing their shelves. And so I ran through like a maniac and got hundreds of books for under $100, and just picked out whatever titles I semi was interested in, authors that I recognized, classic books, old paperbacks, or anything that had like a leather binding that looked pretty old. So I have a really cool collection of books that unfortunately I haven't read, all of them, but I'm trying to get into that. And have you ever watched Professor Hamamoto's channel?
I don't think so.
He's an interesting character. He used to be a professor at UC Davis, and he does a YouTube channel. He keeps getting kicked off YouTube or strikes or whatever, but a lot of his work was still up last I checked. But he talks just a lot about this idea of predictive programming in our books, TV shows, films, pop culture. And actually now I tend to think that is a lot of there's a lot of truth to that. And in terms of history, like I was thinking, I have this thing I made years ago from our local newspaper, the Salt Lake Tribune. The cartoonist, Pat Bagley, he did a series on a guy named Joe Hill, who some people will know But he's pretty obscure for most people. But he was what was it? Industrial Workers of the World was a labor union in the early 1900s. And so the Joe Hill story is pretty interesting because it's the story of the industrial workers, right? People trying to get fair treatment for their labor. And in Salt Lake, in Utah, in the 1900s, the state was run by the Mormon Church and the non-Mormon miners, the mining interests throughout the state. And so the one thing that they could agree on was they wanted the workers to shut up and not demand better pay and conditions. So I always appreciated the Joe Hill story. Because these days I think it's hard to give people context for history because they're so biased in their beliefs. And so, you say union and people just automatically have a feeling about that one way or the other. And people automatically conflate that with communism or corruption or whatever. But yeah, I've just been thinking about how, we're still in that pattern, especially you and me both as like basically gig workers, right? We're not actually employed by people. We're getting gigs, and if that system shuts off, oh well, they owe us nothing. But I always chose to be a freelancer, even, for the last 20 years, because it would allow me some semblance of freedom, to not be married to the 9 to 5 and to the benefits package, and be allowed to quit when I wanted, to have some freedom that way, And I feel like, a lot of the middle class, college educated people, they're in a huge amount of debt and they're kind of stuck. So I'm not saying it's better to be a gig worker with no guarantees of employment, but yeah, I think it's interesting to witness, like, this new era. Like Seb says, there's nothing really new. It's always kind of been like this. So yeah, I'm just trying to do my studies from all these different decades, all these different centuries, to kind of get context to that. Like, oh yeah, people have always had to stand up to defend themselves when necessary, and that kind of hero's archetype. Yeah, maybe that's like the digital world is just trying to let us live it in that environment rather than literally standing up for our rights, because we're placated with this. It's like a digital babysitter, right? So
you mean the idea of like having heroes, like individual heroes?
Yeah, like that is always, we've always been told that we have to go through our sort of hero journey. There's there's countless stories about that, from Homer's Odyssey to and all through storytelling there's that hero narrative. That's a huge archetype. So yeah, I mean, like, it seems to me that if we're all living in the metaverse, then yeah, we can live it all out in there. And in the real life, in real life, we're not going to stand up to anything political. uh we're not going to have the same kind of community engagement because yeah, we're not necessarily going to feel those impacts if we're comfy in our little smart house, you know? So I keep being critical of like my own I just like, well, I just want to be able to feed my family and be comfortable too, you know? So,
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely hard to find like a balance with it. So yeah, it's always tough. So a lot of trade-offs, I guess, like you said, like between having more flexibility, like with gig work, or having maybe more benefits with like a being technically employed by someone, which even that these days doesn't mean as much as it did maybe decades ago or whatever. But yeah, there's always like trade offs, and that's what I try to like remember too. Is I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer, but just try to weigh the different options and just try to trust myself in what choices I make.
yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think it's interesting too because we don't want to have too cushy of a life or else we never get that challenge to grow and to see what we're made of. But I don't want us to get so beat up before we have a chance. You know, there's that harmony with that as well. Cuz yeah, you want to be pushed to greatness, but you don't want to be beaten down.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. It's tough. Like, um, yeah, it's hard because going through difficult things can help someone become like stronger, but at the same time, like it doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that it's a good idea to like necessarily glorify like suffering. That's what even like I think about sometimes because like sometimes like things that I've been through personally like have been difficult, and like in retrospect I am actually kind of like glad that I went through them because they did make me like they did push me to like become stronger, but at the same time I still wouldn't like necessarily wish it on people either because it's not pleasant, and everyone can respond in their own way, and another person might end up in a really bad situation, or would be broken or pushed to push beyond their ability to cope with certain things, and yeah, it can be different for everyone. So it's definitely tough.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, no, there's just so many things to discuss, and I'm glad we got to just kind of dance around this topic a little bit. And I just wanted to see where it would go. I wanted to test out this method of using my phone um, during a live. So I think my daughter was watching this for a moment, and she didn't say the sound was bad or anything. So yeah, I think this worked out really well. I hope that we can talk some more um, going through this year um, because, yeah, I like talking with you. And I like listening to your point of view. I just think, yeah, it's really important to give. Oh, good. So Clem's still here. She says it sounds okay. Um, but but yeah, I really am corny about that notion of um yeah, being able when we show strength, then we give others strength. And that's just kind of why I'm doing this, because I feel like I'm in such a fortunate um position to have had that good balance of like a little bit of struggle, but also kind of um I've always had a lifeline. I've never been without some kind of support. And usually I was my own worst enemy because I would just be too afraid to ask for help before I was in a really bad situation. So yeah, it's part of my processing of that, just learning how to um, put myself out there. And so thanks for being here with me, because uh, I'm kind of a loudmouth and everything, but I still keep a lot inside and uh, somewhat introverted in a way. So yeah, it's cool that I can ask you to join me. I appreciate it.
Well, yeah. Well, thanks for having me on. And definitely enjoyed talking with you. I think you have a lot of interesting things to explore. Just like I like the way like you do have like so many interests, but you're able to like tie them together in a way that makes sense, and that like you're willing to explore them without like totally buying into like one thing or the other. I think that's really important. So thanks, and yeah, I'd love to come back whenever.
Okay, cool. Well, stay on the line. I'm going to end the stream and then just say goodbye to you. So, thank you for watching. Talk soon. Bye.